All right, I'll say this for those who are watching online. If you're planning on coming to our combined gathering Bible study, that will be May the 12th, and you're welcome to come. But the time will be 6 o'clock instead of 6:30. That's what I said before, 6:30. But it's at 6 o'clock at Buffett Heights Baptist Church. So if you have questions or need directions, just let me know. So, okay, coming to chapter 43. Beginning next week, for our last 3 lessons, we'll be combining 2 chapters together in every lesson. Now, I had already combined 44 and 45 and 46 and 47, but we will also need to combine 48 and 49, and then in our combined gathering, I'll briefly cover chapter 50 there. You can bring your book if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. We'll just briefly cover it. But that one won't be live streamed. But if I'd really been on the ball, counting these up correctly, last week I would have said that we would combine 42 and 43. That would have made it fit better, but I didn't realize that until it was just getting down too late, and so here we are. But honestly, this might be kind of a short lesson because, like I said in our prayer, it just is what it is. Yeah, there's just the facts laid out. But I think there's some important things that we can learn from this. But I think, at least for myself, the hardest part to any of this scenario, all the way from, well, actually, if I think about it, all the way back from the time we started with Abraham. Once we started studying individuals in depth, the hardest part for me has, and particularly now in this lesson with Jacob and Joseph, the hardest part is that we really don't know the motives behind all the actions of, in this case, particularly Jacob and Joseph. And we've talked about that so much, and we've had differences of opinion on what we thought their motives were for the things they did. But these last 2 or 3 chapters particularly, there's so much happening that you don't know what motivates them to do the things that they're doing. At least I'm having a hard time with that. I'm not a trained theologian. I don't really know how to pull other scriptures in so much. I know some, and some, when you're studying something and you see a connection, you can tie it in, but I can't do that just off the top of my head. And so I depend a lot on the commentaries and on other teachers. I went so far this week as to listen, or actually I read the transcript so I could get through it quicker, of a sermon of someone that I trust, and, how did they treat this? They were all over the place with it too, so I thought, well, I don't feel too bad about that. But the problem is, like I said last time, is when the commentaries disagree with each other. Or worse, they speculate wildly without scripture to back it up. Now, there are some things, I think there's a difference between speculating and deducing. You can deduce something by what other scriptures say. You can kind of tie it together. It's like when you're talking, your spouse or someone can be talking on the phone and you wonder who they're talking to, and then all of a sudden they say something like, oh yeah, I know who they're talking to, because of a connection there. Well, we can deduce things that are happening and things that they mean by other scripture. But some of these commentaries, they just pull stuff out of thin air. I'm like, where'd you even get that? Like, Joseph had been waiting for them to come. Like, there's no indication he was waiting for them to come. He probably hoped they would, or maybe he daydreamed that they would, but there's nothing that says that he'd been looking for them to come. So there's a lot of that kind of thing. And another thing, I know I beat this to death, but whatever you think about these characters to start with will color how you view what they're doing. If you like them, you'll like what they were doing. If you don't like them, then, they were manipulating or whatever. And so we'll talk about that as we go along. But we ended chapter 42 with Jacob's words ringing in our ears. My son shall not go down there. I mean, adamant. And we said that was easy to say when you have several bags of grain, full bags of grain sitting in front of you. That's easy to say. But what happens when the bags of grain are empty? Now the grain is gone as we come to chapter 43. And we see in verse 1 of chapter 43, now the famine was severe in the land. And you might say, wait a minute, I've read that before. Well, yes, we have. In chapter 41, verse 54, we saw that the famine had begun to come. And then there was famine in all the land. And then in verses 56 through 57 of chapter 41, we read the famine, the second part of verse 56, the famine was severe in the land of Egypt, and the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the earth. But the interesting thing I found this morning as I was studying was that there are two different words used here for severe. I was trying to figure out, it's severe. Well, is there anything to indicate how severe it was? Well, yes, two different words. And both of these words can mean they're superlative words. So they can mean really, really good or really, really bad, depending on the context. And of course, the context here is bad. In verse 41, the word means strong. The famine was strong in the land. It had a strong hold on the land. That's bad. But in chapter 43, the word means heavy. That's even worse. The burden of the famine had become heavy. It's much worse. It was severe in chapter 41. It's much worse now. But what's the amazing thing to me is that in our next lesson, as we get to chapter 44 and 45, in chapter 45, verse 6, we learn that they're only, at this point, 2 years into the famine. There's still 3 more years to go. If it's gone from strong to heavy in just 2 years, how much worse is it going to be in the 5 years? Well, spoiler alert, it's going to be so bad that even the Egyptians are begging for food by that time. But back to chapter 43, verse 1 again. Now the famine was severe in the land, in verse 2, and it came to pass when they had finished, they, that being Jacob and his families, as they had finished eating the grain which they brought back from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back and buy us a little food. Now, we don't know how much time has passed between chapter 42 and 43. I put in your lesson that, in fact, let me get that out because I'm going to need that in a minute. I put in your lesson that, it possibly was about a year since they had gone after the food. But if that's the case, then their first trip to Egypt came as the famine was barely starting. And so we'll talk more about that in a moment. But however long it's been, they're out of grain again. Henry Morris said that Jacob saying, go back and buy us a little food, meant that the food was being rationed in Egypt, that they could only get so much. Other commentaries said that a little food was in relation to the need, that there was such a great need and you get us a little food. The need was great in Jacob's family. And we've talked about the relatively small number of people in Jacob's family. When they go down to Egypt, there'll be only 70 of them. But when you think about feeding 70 people day in and day out, and most of them are growing boys, that's going to take a lot of food. And even though 9 brothers came back with several donkeys carrying grain, it still couldn't have been that much. And what they brought back didn't last very long. But at any rate, they're now out of grain, and so their father said to them, go and buy us a little food. So apparently there's another family meeting going on. The father said to them. He didn't say to one person, he said to them. But look who speaks up this time. Verse 3 says, Judah spoke to him, however, saying, the man, of course that's Joseph, but they don't know that, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. And so Judas is saying to Jacob, if you send our brother with us, we'll go down and buy you some food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Now Judah realized that the man in Egypt was not to be messed with. And so he gave Jacob an ultimatum. Benjamin has to go. I mean, how hungry are you? Are you hungry enough now that you will do what the man said to do?
Well, he would have died anyway.
Yeah. So they're all going to die. You know, what are you going to do? So at first, Jacob begins to complain. And as I was reading it, I thought, it seems more like whining to me than complaining. It could be that he's acquiescing. He could just be giving in. He knows that Judah is right. But it just hurts so much. But notice, as we go into verse 6, he's not called Jacob here. What's he called? Israel. What can that mean? I mean, it's got to mean something. It can't be just a synonym. But I was surprised that very few of the commentaries even mentioned that, brought attention to it. But here's what I think. I think we are beginning to see his faith take over. Not much at first, just a little. But honestly, I think we've all had those times when faith, tiny as it was, begin to take over our fear. Maybe faith with a pounding heart would be a good way to describe that. We can imagine Jacob wincing. He knows what has to be done. He knows that they'll die. But it pained him so much. But look at what he said, verses 6 and 7. Then Israel said, why did you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you had still another brother? Why'd you even tell him you had another brother? But they, and this is, we don't know who's saying what. They, some saying this, others saying that, some adding details in, I think. They together said, the man questioned particularly about us and our relatives, saying, is your father still alive, and have you another brother? So what could we do? We answered his questions. How could we possibly know that he would say, bring your brother down here? Now, is that how the conversation went? Were we at the same scene in the last chapter? Is that how it went? I don't remember it going that way.
I don't remember that way either.
So what did Joseph do to get them to spill the beans? What did he accuse them of?
Being spies.
Being spies. And they were so scared, when they didn't give enough information, he doubled down on the accusation. And they gave even more. Look back at chapter 42, verses 9 through 13. And Joseph remembered the dreams. But in the dream, all 11 brothers were bowing down. And now there's only 10. And so he has to do something to find out about Benjamin. And so he said to them, you're spies. You've come to look at the undefended parts of our land. They said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. Nobody in their right mind is going to send all their sons at one time. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Well, that didn't tell him enough. And then he said, no, you've come to look out the undefended parts of our land. And so they give even more information. Your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father, and one is no more. So now he's got all the information that they're there, but he still doesn't know what he wants to know. But that's how the conversation went.
I don't remember. Did we say that he knew who his brothers were?
Oh, yeah. Before that, it says he recognized them. Yeah, he knew exactly who they were.
I just couldn't remember from last time.
Obviously, they didn't recognize him because he's dressed differently, looks differently. It's 20 years later and all that.
But do you think he recognized them right away?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he did. It says that he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So some of the commentaries suggest, because these two explanations are different, some of the commentaries suggested that there is more conversation that went on that we don't have recorded. Well, that's possible.
It's always a possibility.
Yeah, and we have seen times where that happened, and it's clear that that's what happened. But this time, I think they just didn't want to tell their father that they'd been accused of being spies, because they haven't told him that in any thing that they've told him. And when they were accused of being spies, they just blurted out everything they knew. Yeah, they just told everything, and gave all the details. But as we saw then, Judah now has taken the lead for speaking for the brothers. Why Judah? Verse 3, Judah spoke to him. And Judah's the one who gave him the ultimatum. Why Judah now? Any thoughts on that?
I thought I read where he was the most trusted of the brothers.
Well, I think he gets that way, but remember that chapter 38 and him and Tamar, that whole bit.
Yeah.
Well, Reuben was the oldest.
Reuben was the oldest.
And then he's out of the picture now.
Well, he's not out of the picture. He's there.
He's not there.
He is there. Simeon's the one's in prison.
Oh, that's him. Okay.
Well, Judah is the one that said sell him instead of kill him.
Yeah, so there is that. Yeah. Well, as Sandy began to mention Reuben, but remember, Reuben made that ridiculous suggestion last time. You can kill my sons if I don't bring Benjamin back. Like, what's that going to help? That's not going to solve anything.
They kind of took two different approaches, Reuben versus Judah, did, to how to deal with their dad. And Judah, instead of offering sons, offered himself.
Right, there is that, yeah. Yeah, he did. Reuben, as bad as it would be to have your children killed, still it's not him. And Judah, you're right, Judah is offering himself.
Judah said, if I don't come back with Benjamin,
Yeah. And there's a great deal that goes with what he said there. So Reuben's not going to open his mouth. Simeon, the second born's in prison in Egypt. Levi, the third oldest one, is as bloodthirsty and as angry as Simeon, so he's not going to say anything. And so that leaves Judah to take the place of the firstborn and as spokesman for the family. And we begin to see that. If you remember when we did chapter 38 and we saw all that Judah did, I said, watch for him. Watch and see how he grows. Watch how he grows spiritually. I think we begin to see it here. Actually, we see it at the end of chapter 38 when he confesses that Tamar was more righteous than he was. That was his first step. That what he had done was wrong, and what she had done, though may have been wrong, was better than what he did. And so here Judah is firm, but he's kind. He speaks gently to his father. Look at verses 8 through 10. First of all, verse 8. Judah said to his father Israel. Now, the writer is Moses, as he's being inspired to write this, emphasizes Israel. And I just believe that we've got to see a change in the man when he is being referred to as Israel. Judah said to his father, this doesn't say he said to his father, said to his father Israel, send the lad with me. Now, Benjamin is at least early to mid-20s. But Judah recognizes, like we say, I don't make any difference how old our kids are. They're still our babies, He recognizes what Judah is feeling toward Benjamin. Send the lad with me, and we will rise and go, that we may live and not die. And then he adds, we, us brothers, as well as you and all of our little ones. You got to remember, Dad, there's all these little ones, all these children who are suffering. You can't be that selfish. You've got to let him go.
I wonder if the fact that they had children of their own, Jacob had been suffering all these years. He had been grief-stricken all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder that as they began to have children and they became parents, if there was a keener understanding of what they had put their father through.
But may have been. That's another one of those things that we don't have in Scripture, but that may very well have been part of it. And Jacob especially. Judah especially. So then in verse 9 he says, I myself, remember you got two especially in translation I'm using, when you got two pronouns together, I myself, I in and of myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame before you forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice. So Judah said, if I don't bring Benjamin back to you, you can blame me forever. Now, at first glance, that seems to be not much better than Reuben's offer. Yeah, Reuben would have lost his children, but Judah said, you can blame me forever. Well, okay, I'll blame you forever. What's that going to do?
Forever is a weird addition to that.
Yeah, but just carry the blame forever. But, what good will that do? But there's more to this than meets the eye. That phrase, to bear the blame before you forever, means to be cut off from the family. Not killed, but cut off financially. Receiving no inheritance, plus all of his belongings, all of his property, then would become Jacob's property. He would essentially be destitute, be cut off.
Ostracized.
Yeah. Now, what did we learn about Judah in chapters 37 and 38? Do you remember what motivated Judah? What did he want to do with Joseph instead of kill him? Sell him. Do you remember, and for how much? You remember? 20 pieces of silver. And then we come to chapter 38. What woman caught his eye? The daughter of what kind of a man? A rich man. He wanted to sell Judah. Yeah, money. He's motivated by money. But now he is willing to give up his inheritance and even forfeit his own property and possessions. I'd say he's taken quite a leap of spiritual growth.
Starting to see his leadership.
Yeah, starting to see his leadership come about. That's exactly right. And then look at what he adds in verse 10. Now, this was interesting to me. He said, if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice. Now, I don't know if that's hyperbole. We could have been there back a dozen times, if we hadn't have delayed. But he says twice. Or perhaps he's relating how long it's been since they came back. As I said at the beginning, we don't know exactly how long it's been since they went for grain the first time. Some commentaries say 2 years, but like we said, if that's so, they had to have gone very early in the famine because they're only 2 years into the famine. And by the way, if it's been 2 years, think about poor Simeon sitting down there in prison for 2 years, wondering if anybody's ever going to come back. But if we take Judah's words here as our timeline, how long has it been? So let's do a little math. How long did the trip to Egypt take? Do you remember? It's 250 miles. How long did we say it took? Do you remember?
3 days.
No, not 3 days. Not 3 years. What's in between there?
3 months.
No, not 3 months.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. I knew if we kept it going, we'd get it. 3 weeks. 3 weeks there, 3 weeks back. 3 weeks there, and 3 weeks back. 3, 6, 9, 12. That's about 3 months. That actually makes sense of about how much grain they could have carried back and how long it could have lasted them. We could have gone back after grain twice and with the idea of if we had started back when it began to run low, we would have never run out. But now they're running out. But still, in 3 months' time, Simeon's got to be wondering where they were. And then finally, look at what Jacob, or rather Israel, said, verses 11 through 14. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bags and carry down to the man as a present a little balm and a little honey. Your translation may read this differently. That's what mine says. A little balm and a little honey, aromatic gum and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Now, I didn't go back and look it up in order to read it to you, but the commentaries talked about, I believe it was the gum and the myrrh is what those travelers were taking that they sold Jacob to. You know, they were tradesmen. They were taking this down there. So that was some of the things they were taking. All of these things that is mentioned here are not grown in Egypt. In fact, the honey, which I just thought was honey because they lived in what would later be called the land of milk and honey. But all of the commentaries describe this honey more as like a grape syrup. They called it grape honey, where they would, crush the grapes and make a thick syrup out of it. And that's what they would take. Like I said, they called it grape honey. But he said, put this together, take it to him,